All right. And we are live on Parapost Network. Welcome to Paranormal, the New Normal. And this week, I've been looking forward to this week for a long, long time. Since I started the show, basically. Because I have a legend in the paranormal world in my mind. And probably in a lot of other people's mind, too. Because I believe the Small Town Monsters community on Facebook has a lot of members. So, and yes, I just kind of give it away. My guest is Mark Matsky of Small Town Monsters, of Monsteropolis, and of SasWhat.
Yes.
He's a busy man, just like I am, but multiple shows, but we make it work.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for having me on, Jeremy. This is great.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Between you and Seth, I've been wanting to talk to both of you for so long, but
yeah.
So, why don't you tell the listeners just what it is Small Town Monsters does? Because I'm sure you can say it better than I can.
Yeah. Well, Small Town Monsters is an independent production company that is most of all concerned with how strange and unusual events affect locations, typically small towns or regions of the United States and sometimes Canada, of course. And sort of the crossover between just cryptid creatures and unexplained events on one hand, and the impact that it has on people's lives. And of course, you know, if you've seen some of our productions and so forth, we pay a lot of attention to the people and sort of the ongoing effect it has when something strange happens to you or your family. Can sometimes be profound and can change the trajectory of a person's life. So we're interested in that. We're interested in the histories of these places, sort of the general background of the small towns across the country and how their fortunes have changed. And especially when there is a legend or a weird happening in a small town or a backwoods region of the country, if they're able to sort of latch onto that story as a way of sort of revitalizing that community. So we're interested in all of that. We do that primarily through the medium of documentary film, but also some podcasting, of course, and announcements were just made today, as a matter of fact, about Small Town Monsters Publishing, which is a publishing arm, dipping our toe into the book field, which is something near and dear to my heart. So that's just a little bit of the background there.
Yes, as I said, Small Town Monsters is a very, very busy company. And, I mean, how long did it go without an episode of Monsteropolis over the last couple months, I think?
Yeah, it was about a month to 5 week span, just because all of the principal people having to do with Monsteropolis were either at home or in Alaska on a 2-week shoot. So when those things happen, you know, something has to take priority. And right now, that's the films. You know, the films are the main thing, and the YouTube content as well has become a real mainstay for STM.
Yeah, I mean, which, if I'm not mistaken, you guys were up in Alaska filming your last part of the Big Foot Trilogy you guys have been working on for the last 5-6 years?
Yeah, and the thing that was interesting about that particular shoot is that there were projects happening concurrently, which is to say that a number of projects, 2 or 3 were filming at one time, with the addition of, the thing that people have seen, hopefully by now, is Alex and Eli's project from Beyond the Trail. And there's more coming, more of a polished documentary, I guess you would say, or the ones that people are used to seeing from STM. And then another project beyond that sort of grew spontaneously in what was encountered while the crew was out there. Just something they kept hearing about and so forth. And there's not a whole lot more I can say about that, but there's more coming that is both Bigfoot and maybe not so much Bigfoot related, having to do with Alaska.
Interesting. I mean, I know a few cryptids from Alaska that have legends of being up there, and if it's what I hope it is, I hope if it's what I hope it is, I will be very happy when it comes out. Which
Yeah.
because thanks to Cryptid Crate, who does sponsor this show, I've been a subscriber for years, so I have a bunch of Small Town Monster DVDs that came in Cryptid Crates, and I bought a bunch more on Amazon Prime as well, just because I've been trying to watch through them, but being on other podcasts where you have to watch 100 movies a month, it gets kind of hard to put things in
I get
the
it.
schedule.
For sure.
I right now am up to On the Trail of UFOs. That's the last
okay.
one. Which
nice.
Amazingly done as always. I mean, I like how the styles changed too, though, from like the earlier STM films to like the newer ones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's nice to see like other people talking. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Lyle Blackburn. He's a interesting guy to have tell you stories. He has that voice that just makes you want to listen and listen. But
sure,
it's nice to see different faces every once in a while too. But it's just nice to see things evolve like that, and just shows that how much you guys are growing, which is amazing. Because like I said, I'm a huge fan, and you guys are part of the reason I got back into the paranormal between you and Monsters Among Us podcast. So, but I gotta say, the one I am looking forward to watching the most, I'm dying to see, but I just haven't found the time yet, is How the Roo Grew.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which, because as anybody who listens to my show knows, I'm a huge Dogmen fan. Like, I'm a huge Dogmen lover. I've been trying to get Dogmen, people who have actually had encounters with Dogmen on here for a while. I've had one story so far, but nothing substantial that I want to have yet. But I love Dogmen. I mean, just everything about them. And so that was all shot down in New Orleans and the surrounding area, right?
Yeah, that's right. And Houma, Louisiana, played a big role in that. Interestingly, it wasn't very long after the crew was down there for principal filming that one of the big hurricanes blew in and really did extensive damage on that entire region, and a number of the places that are in the film don't exist the way that they're captured on film anymore. So it's kind of a true documentary in the sense that it documents a place that is not the same just due to natural causes. But the lore down there is long, and there's lots of stories. What was really interesting, I think, for the crew was to see how there was along with the Rougarou stories, there were also Bigfoot accounts, and sort of bumping up against one another in an interesting way. And part of the, not to spoil things since you haven't seen it yet, but the part of the story itself has to do with the land and the way that the ocean itself is reclaiming a lot of the land that used to be prime sighting location. So there's a lot of questions that accompany that. It's a really good one. It's so different. It's an entirely different setting than, say, Pacific Northwest or the Adirondacks or these heavily wooded places. The bayou land of Louisiana is just different in many ways.
God, yeah. I mean, I actually am originally from Kingston, New York. So all the ones you guys shoot in the Adirondacks, Catskills is like right in my backyard in a way, kind of. I mean, not exactly, because it's still a couple hours drive north.
Yeah,
but we were at the foothills of the Catskills growing up. So, and I didn't spend too much time in the woods. I'm not a woods kid, but even back then as a kid, I wanted to see something, and just I lived in the suburbs. It wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. Right. I mean, it would have been awesome, but it wasn't going to happen. So, but you said Pacific Northwest, and that's actually the other one I'm dying to see is On the Trail of Bigfoot, the one you guys did out on the Olympic Project area.
Yeah.
Because I heard tale on the podcast that you guys might have actually found some good evidence.
Yeah, the discovery On the Trail of Bigfoot, the discovery, took us back out to the Olympic Peninsula, and we were hosted out there by the members of the Olympic Project who opened their research facility to us. and took us out to the site of the nests, the infamous nest site. And part of what's revealed in discovery is the fact that there may be more than one nest site. And that only makes sense if we're talking about a real biological reality, making its home in the forests. It would hold that they would make more than one site. And so that was extraordinary to be able to see what's left over there with our own eyes. And all that is to say, it's changed significantly since the time that it was first discovered. It was made, the nests in question were made out of huckleberry branches broken off of bushes. And so, of course, once they're broken off and placed, they have a limited shelf life at that point. So we were able to see remnants of it, but it wasn't just seeing the remnants that was so awe-inspiring, but also the location in which they were found and how it just seemed utterly unlikely that anyone would go down there for any reason, much less to build huckleberry nests in the midst of more huckleberry bushes on the side of a slope. I mean, it begged the question of, how likely, if people would look at that and say, well, it's obviously a hoax. Well, to what end? Who did they hope would find it? Because it was an accident that they were found by a surveyor. But yeah, that was an unbelievable trip. I personally, that's one of my favorite places on Earth, is the Olympic Peninsula. It's so beautiful and rugged, and one of the few national parks that doesn't have a road that goes through it. There's roads that go around it, and you can go into it to a certain degree, but you're not going to drive through the Olympics.
Yeah.
And there's something special about that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like, it kind of gives you that like untouched by man feeling that you can't find unless you're in really remote places nowadays. I mean, either jungles in South America or Africa, or basically maybe Russian freaking tundra. Like that's,
yeah.
Which I mean, I actually had a guest tell me the other day that about stories of woolly mammoths being seen on the Russian tundra. Which, I could possibly believe. I mean,
sure.
that gets into the whole hollow Earth theory, maybe, but that's a whole nother wormhole.
That's fascinating.
Well, actually, has STM ever thought about doing a documentary about the hollow Earth theory?
Oh, I'm sure it's come up and sort of. It's something that we've somewhat explored somewhere on a podcast. I remember having
I do remember
a loose conversation. And certainly, I mean, again, not to spoil things too much, but caves and cave systems comes up in a number of topics that have been covered by STM, and somewhat surprisingly, not limited to like cryptid creatures, but also the UFO phenomena. So it certainly is. That's something we've scratched the surface of, and I would have to guess that we have to deal with it some more, because it's a topic that won't go away, and it shouldn't go away, because a lot of the answers might be right under our feet,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's that meme that goes around Facebook where it's a map of the cave systems in the eastern United States and compared to the missing 411 people.
Yeah. Oh,
and
sure.
It's trippy how close everything is, and it's like, that just kind of explains things, doesn't it? I mean, there's something going on in those caves. I don't know what it is, but there's something going on in those caves deep within. I mean, I mean, I know I had an investigator on here named Lon Strickler from Pennsylvania, Phantoms and Monsters. I don't know if you heard of him, but
oh yeah, yep,
yeah. I mean, he said he worked with you guys a couple times, but
yeah,
he talked about having sightings of dogmen and dragons near mining caves in Pennsylvania. So, which when he said dragons, I was like, am I on Supernatural or Harry Potter? Like what?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent for Mokele-Mbembe, so I mean,
Hmm.
dragons are just the next step in that line. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and oddly, there's a dragon story that comes out of the Chestnut Ridge area in southwest Pennsylvania.
yeah,
And that's a case that Stan Gordon has looked into and talked to the principal witness. It's bizarre, but the taken at face value, the Chestnut Ridge has just got a cornucopia of really,
yeah.
really off the charts weird stories. And then seeing a dragon fly over you, I think, is definitely one of those kind of
I,
stories.
I mean, what if that's what people are seeing out west though too, and they're just classifying it as thunderbirds or
Mm-hmm.
pterodactyls? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's it's possible. I mean, it's in so many history books and legends that dragons existed that they kind of had to at some point, whether
Yeah.
they all got killed off like we believe, or they never existed, or they do still exist. They just got better at hiding, like a lot of cryptids
Mm-hmm.
did, because humans are idiots and just want to kill,
Yeah.
and they just want to kill
Steer
everything they
clear.
see.
Right.
But
Right.
I mean, but it's just weird. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people also say like the whole everything like that is ultra terrestrial. That they're popping in now dimensional rifts like in weak spots. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I am not a fan of that theory personally because it just it's too much of a easy say all. Like, oh, everything's ultra terrestrial. Bigfoot, dogmen,
Yeah.
thunderbirds, everything's is
Mm-hmm.
ultra terrestrial. Aliens are ultra terrestrial, and they come through. I mean, I can believe that part, but because that would explain a lot with aliens. But everything else, I mean, I don't know. It just seems too much of an easy catch-all. But
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying, and I think there's a lot to that. Everyone wants what some folks call that the unified theory or the
yeah,
theory of everything. It would be nice if we could tie it all up in one package like that. But there's also, on the other hand, there's the idea that like you said, it's too easy and it's too convenient to explain one mystery with another. But that's not proof. It doesn't prove anything. It just is a way of getting at the deeper problem. But folks like John Keel, for example, who I believe coined that term ultra terrestrial.
I believe he did. Yeah,
Yeah, I was just thinking, just trying to think of what might be behind it all, and it's fine to think of that. I think it's a good mental exercise, but I'm sort of with you. I don't think it explains everything. And in the
I
case
mean,
of like dragons, for example, that's a perfect example where the antecedent of that could have very well been a surviving sort of relic dinosaur, perhaps that human beings came into contact with and preserved that story down through time. We don't know, and that's the bottom line. But
I mean, they could be in the same class or species as sea lake monsters, technically, because
yeah,
I mean, the Asians had dragons they weren't like the European dragons. They were look like more like snakes. I mean,
mm-hmm.
and I mean, not all the dragons are gonna be like European medieval dragons with the big wings, like straight out of Harry Potter. I mean, they're not gonna look like
Yeah,
that in real life. They're gonna
yeah,
be more bird-like in appearance, almost because dinosaurs were birds, kind of in a
mm-hmm.
way, more than the reptiles. So that's I don't know. I mean, it would explain a lot. I mean, sea monsters. I mean, that's a whole nother story. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that goes into everything with the whole. What if the bottom of the ocean really does have a layer that like certain things can't escape through, but other things can't? Like, I mean, they touched on it in the Meg, kind of, but just
Mm-hmm.
as a way to explain it. But I don't know. I mean, there's just too much. There's too many stories about it that it's just I have to believe everything. I don't know. I find it hard to not believe in anything because everything there's so much evidence of. I mean, all you gotta
Yeah,
do is listen and look, and you'll find evidence of everything. It's just crazy. I mean,
sure. Well, and
because
the ocean, for example, it's so vast and so
yeah,
unexplored. We really don't have much of an idea of what's down there. Let's be honest. It's only what comes to the surface, pretty much, that we can even talk about. And I'm sure, like, for example, the people who saw the Komodo dragon for the first time
Yeah.
probably thought, they were seeing a dinosaur like running towards them on the beach or whatever. And there are those sort of real world creatures that we continue to talk about. The giant squid was thought of as a legendary creature until it showed up on deep sea cameras.
Yeah.
Things happen. They continue to happen.
Yeah, which it totally is. Oh, and plus, if you look at it, sharks are coming closer and closer to land now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what if things are starting to be able to come up more because of global warming and everything? And what if these creatures are scaring like the original predators we knew, sharks, closer to
Mm-hmm.
land because of that?
Yeah.
It's one possibility. It's 100% a possibility. But
Sure.
I'd like to personally believe that megalodon exists. I know there's not really proof. There has been some proof though, because people have taken pictures of some things and they're like, that is too big to be a shark we've identified in the past. Like,
yeah,
but they can't catch it. Like it disappears as fast as it's seen.
Right.
And plus, look at the Greenland shark. It was just discovered after being thought to be extinct for what, 500 years, I think, or 1,000.
Yeah. Yes.
It's just. We're still learning about this world. That's why I understand why you like. I understand why you like the no man land, like parts of the world that you've been to. It's just.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard Alaska is gorgeous. I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to actually go up there, but I would love to. It looks like a gorgeous place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard stories on other podcasts about encounters in Alaska too with certain dog themed cryptids, but which is kind of where I'm hoping that your thing you're talking about is going. But we'll see in the future.
Yeah.
I'll have to listen to Monsteropolis and keep you listening to hear more details.
Yeah.
Which actually, that is something I did want to ask you about, because I did hear in the last episode about the books coming out, the publishing.
Right.
Have you guys announced at all what the books are going to be about, or is that still hush hush?
No. The first 2 titles were announced today, as a matter of fact, on the Small Town Monsters, all the socials, all those places. And what's really exciting is the first title to talk about is by Bruce Hallenbeck, who's featured in On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Journey, which is the Adirondacks trip.
Yeah.
Bruce Hallenbeck is probably the most, he has the most documented history of cases on the Kinderhook Creature from the Kinderhook area of the Hudson Valley. And so and he has that documentation because many of the sightings of that creature took place within his own family, between himself, family, friends. I believe his mother and his sister had their own encounters with the creature. So that's going to be the first title this fall, is The Kinderhook Creature by Bruce Hallenbeck, a personal remembrance of that time in history when the Kinderhook Creature was being cited, reported in the local paper. That, of course, when that cycle begins, then other people step forward with their own sightings. And the fact that these sightings took place in Kinderhook is very interesting, because that's not necessarily mountainous. It's not the first place you would think of that would be a Bigfoot hotspot, but there is enough green space connecting it to the Adirondacks and moving northward and also northeast into extreme western Massachusetts, that there's some viability there for a mystery creature to kind of go back and forth if they're sort of migrating along and following the waterways. So that's the first title, and we're really excited about that because, as we said, Bruce is featured in On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Journey, and he is an accomplished author in his own right. Not only has he written on Bigfoot before, but he's also a film historian and has written about B movies and science fiction films. and the Hammer films, Hammer horror, and is kind of a world-class historian of those films. So we're really excited to have him on the STM imprint, sort of batting leadoff for us. We think that'll be a real strong intro to what we want to do with our publishing.
Oh, I mean, it definitely seems like it will be. And it's funny because the Kinderhook area is actually kind of halfway between where I grew up and where I live now.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, I don't know. I live in central western Massachusetts now, and I could easily see a Bigfoot popping out of my backyard any day because I mean, it's a lot of woods, and the Leominster State Forest, which is like 15 minutes east of me, is a known Bigfoot hotspot. And I mean, a lot of Massachusetts is. I mean, the Bridgewater Triangle, especially, which my wife actually lived in the Bridgewater Triangle before we moved in together, and I spent a lot of time down there, like exploring the woods where they're in like Freetown State Forest and everything else.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
And there's even a historical corn. What the hell they do on it? A corn crushing rock on her grandfather's property that he originally owned, that is by the tribe that got slaughtered in the Bridgewater Triangle, making the legend happen. Oh my
goodness! Wow.
So it's and I'll tell you, I mean, the house she lived in was straight up built on a Native American burial ground. So it's a creepy place. You stand outside at night in the backyard, and you just feel like you're being watched by something. Like it's so, and you hear something, and you just jump like 5 feet high. We've seen UFOs off her back porch. My stepson actually pointed out to us like that stars were moving, and I was like, "No,
oh wow!"
I mean, and she straight up thinks she's been abducted too in the past. I mean, it's just we've caught things outside her window on the camera in her room that was ridiculous, like big black hulking figures like on a second-story roof, which I can't explain how that happens. Right. I mean, that's not Bigfoot. That's not Bigfoot. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I'm like, something coming down. It's not something climbing up. But
that would get your attention for sure. Yeah, I'm jealous because that's an area I've not been to. I'd love to make a trip to the Bridgewater Triangle sometime.
Oh, I've been saying for a long time I want SmallTownMonsters to make a Bridgewater Triangle documentary. Like, because there was one back in the '90s, but it's a very plain and dry documentary. It's not like it doesn't keep you watching like your guys do. Like, it's not like action. It's just somebody talking over pictures. But so I mean, it'd be awesome if someone actually did a new one on it. There's so much out there too. I mean, Puckwudgies, Bigfoot, UFOs, giant snakes. I mean, it's a cornucopia of paranormal.
Yeah, and as you said, I mean, it goes into the deep history of this country, and even predates, the United States, the history that's out there. So there's just so much going on in that location. You're right. I think it's probably inevitable that at some point, STM does something with that, because it's something we love talking about. In the very early episodes of Monsteropolis, we did a whole Bridgewater Triangle show and spent probably 15 minutes just talking about the Native American history and sort of the uneasy alliances with the explorers, and how some of the tribes wanted to trade and others resented the fact that there were New World people here, and it was just a real contentious time. Very interesting historically.
Oh yeah, I mean it is. That's one of my favorite parts of history, is the whole colonization of the whole world basically by Europeans. But I mean, it's so brutal and horrible, but it's just shows you the true face of humans. That's the true face of humans right there. But and I mean, the whole Bridgewater Triangle thing is just so. I mean, and actually, I want to say it was episode 5 or 6 of Monsteropolis. You guys talked about that. I feel like it was. I feel like it was. I mean,
no, you're right. That's right around there.
Yeah. I binged. I think I'm pretty sure I binged the first like 12, 13 episodes like in 2 days. So I do have very good recollection for those episodes.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome.
Back when you guys still had the theme song.
Right.
the
Yeah.
entry.
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I gotta admit, I gotta miss. It was funny how Seth would always change it up, but
Right. Yeah, it was fun.
yeah. I mean, whenever it said put on your clown paint, I'm like, is that a Juggalo reference? Like, that's the only thing I can think of it is a Juggalo reference.
Uh-huh.
They're in Ohio. Ohio's not that big a Juggalo scene, I don't think. But I don't know. That's like, I mean, being one myself, that's just where my mind went. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
you'd have to ask Seth about that one. I'm not sure what he had in mind.
so what were you saying the second book was announced to be?
Oh, yeah. So the second book is a book by one of the Moth Boys. If you are tuned into Moth Boys podcasts and their whole scene,
I've heard of
it
them.
is it's a book by Michael Strayer and illustrated by Bolly Raven. It's called Curious Creatures: The Vegetable Man, and it's the beginning of a series for kids. It's really intended for young readers, and the idea is that they go a lot like Small Town Monsters does for documentaries. The book series goes around to different locations and kind of gets to know the local cryptid. Sometimes those are reality, and I imagine sometimes those will be just imaginative characters. But so you can see what we're trying to do is diversify and hit a
Yeah.
number of target audiences. Certainly when you go to cryptid conferences and things of that nature, Bigfoot conferences in particular, but sort of like CryptidCon and the others, it's inevitable that you see kids and families that are there. So we want to be able to give them something that they can enjoy and maybe whet their appetite for taking the next step into maybe a little more serious inquiry into these topics. But so Mike Strayer, he's one of the Moth Boys, and he is going to be launching what we hope is going to be a series of books moving forward.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's a great thing for kids because, I mean, I wish I had that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Because I had the one book in the library on Bigfoot, Loch Ness, and all the basic cryptids of the 90s.
Yeah.
And then at the end, there was a little section about what if dinosaurs still exist. But
Mm-hmm.
other than
Yep.
that, like, that's all we had until, like, the early 2000s when they really, like, started pumping out the reality shows and the, like, Monsters and Mysteries in America, or even some of the unsolved mysteries, like, and of course Monster Quest when it came out finally. But
Yeah.
even Monster Quest is kind of like, we're gonna tease you with this for an hour, but we're not gonna actually say anything about it.
Right. Yeah.
But
Exactly.
and I
Yeah.
mean it's funny because that book reminded me of something. I can't think of what it is. I mean, I'm definitely gonna get that book just to read to my kids because I want
Sure.
them to be. But oh well, actually, it's funny you say that the kids are getting into it because I was on Monsters Among Us live program last Halloween, and I got
Oh,
beat in
yeah.
I got beat in the trivia portion by a kid
Yeah.
by
I
like
can believe it.
by like
Yeah.
2 points. But I bowed down. And I was just like, I respect you. I respect you. If at your
Yeah.
age, if you know all this stuff, I respect you. Because some of these
Yes.
questions I could even think of, like he must study paranormal anytime he's not in real school. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
and plus, I mean, I've heard of the cryptid kid who's at conventions and stuff. He was on. I forget the name of the podcast. It was two Southern guys. They stopped doing it though because the one got sick.
Okay.
It was a funny podcast. My God,
Yeah.
I got into it.
Yeah.
Same time I got into Monsteropolis. Basically, I forget what it's called. Actually, I should look into them again. But so, any future movie ideas that you guys do have that you can actually talk about, or is it all still in?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, one that just launched on YouTube 5 days ago is Sasquatch Unearthed the Ridge. And that was the first episode and what's going to be a multi-episode approach and sort of a return to the Chestnut Ridge, highlighting the work of people like Stan Gordon, Eric Altman, Ron Murphy and others. We're excited about that. That just got started. I mean, it's not been out for a week, but that's one that I'm, as far as the part of the story is concerned, Eli Watson and I are collaborating on that to work on the narrative part of how the story gets told, and that falls largely on Eli to do. But he gives me some ideas for the narration, and I sort of rework some of it and add things in that I know about the Ridge, and then I'm doing the narration on that, which I'm always excited about doing. I love contributing in that way to the documentaries, and so that's definitely just getting started. That's free on YouTube for anyone to watch. Beyond the Trail continues to go strong. Eli and Alex Petikoff are just going great guns right now, and I love to watch that, even though I know those guys pretty well at this point, but I love to watch it because it's just like they're going to so many places that I may or may not ever be able to go myself. And just to see it through their eyes, and to kind of, like, the one that sticks in my mind is the Bluff Creek episode, that who knows if I'll ever make it to Bluff Creek, but they did. And they, through their eyes, you can sort of see what it's like there. So other future projects, I think the one that's close to being wrapped is the Jersey Devil. And I think people are really going to be surprised by that one, because whatever they're thinking it's going to be, it's probably not close to what they imagine our documentary on the Jersey Devil is going to turn out like. And I say that for a couple of reasons, one of which is for the first time in our history, we worked with professional actors for the recreation scenes. And so what they bring to the table in terms of acting chops and making things seem realistic in the moment is just phenomenal. And I can't wait for people to see the job that they did in front of the cameras. It's going to bring a lot of, especially like the historical elements of the Jersey Devil legend and story to life.
Yeah, which, I mean, I'm interested to see that too, because the Jersey Devil is such a, like, a lot of people consider it like a one-off story. Like, they don't think it's
right. Yeah.
ongoing. But I mean, I've heard call-ins on podcasts of people saying they think they were around it or saw it, the whole hearing the train thing when it's coming. But
yeah,
which I don't know how that works. But I mean,
no,
the Jersey Devil is interesting. I mean, I always been fascinated by it, being from New York and being so close to Jersey. And it's funny how many people don't realize that that's what the hockey team's named after. But
yeah, right, exactly.
I've had so many people be like, "That's what's named after." I'm like, "What did you think they call them the Jersey Devils for? You think hell? I mean, yes, some people consider New Jersey hell, but I don't, I don't think that's what they were implying with that."
Right? Yeah. No. Yeah, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And I think a very excellent book was written by Brian Regal about the Jersey Devil legend, and Seth was able to get an interview with Brian, and that's in the documentary. So it's going to be good. And you're right. It's such a specific story, such a historical story, and tied into legend. There's a lot of questions with that, of course, but it's gonna. I like it. I just like this particular doc a lot, and I think once it comes out, people will see why.
Yeah, I mean, is it going to be kind of almost similar in way to the way you guys did the Bell Witch one, because that's like a one-off too? It's not like a massive worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It will bear a lot of resemblances to Bell Witch for sure. Right down to the kind of historical recreations that were done for that. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember you guys talking about how much fun Heather
Hmm.
had doing that recreation, but
Yeah.
which I gotta say, I love that you guys started including her in the podcast weekly. I mean,
Hmm.
she is so knowledgeable in everything she talks about. I mean, just like you guys are, it's an amazing ad. Which I know when she first came on, some people tried to hate on it in the comments and everything. And I was like,
Hmm.
come on. I'm like, she knows more than you guys in the comments probably do about
Right.
all this.
Yes.
I mean, I mean, I could listen to her talk about giants for hours, and
Hmm.
I never get bored of it. Like it's just
Right.
she has so much history and everything she talks about on that show. And
Yeah.
I keep meaning to add her podcast to my list of podcasts I listen to on a weekly basis. I just keep forgetting to do it. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Lord,
Heather's
the
the
Lord,
more you know.
people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Heather's phenomenal. She really is. And I've sort of taken upon myself. I'm glad that, we've actually had the opportunity once in a while and recently for sure. It's been a lot of the two of us on Monsteropolis. And I'm glad for that because it's given Heather more of a platform. And I've tried to draw her out a little bit because I think at first Heather was a little bit hesitant to kind of get in the mix
Yeah,
because she had just had no experience podcasting
of
whatsoever.
course, of course.
So the more that she's gotten comfortable, I think it's paid dividends for the listener more than anybody because, as you said, once she starts to reveal, the depth of her knowledge and her ability to connect that to sort of her wheelhouse, which is ancient history and mythology, you can see why she's made such an impact at Small Town Monsters and will continue to do so because she just has the ability to connect the dots.
Yeah,
Where a lot of us, and I would say even myself included, a lot of the times we don't even know where the dots are, and she's connecting the dots. So she's a real asset to STM, but to the larger community as well.
I agree 100%. And it's funny because I'm the same way with mythology and all because I listen to mythology, I read mythology like all my
Yeah.
life, and I mean, on one of the episodes of this podcast, I even got into mythology with someone for a good 45 minutes
Oh yeah.
instead of the paranormal we were supposed to be talking about. We got into mythology,
Sure.
but I mean, it's all related in a way, kind of.
Hmm.
I mean, dog men go back to mythology, goat men go back to mythology. Everything
Yeah.
goes back to mythology in some way or form. It's history, but
Hmm.
the only thing that doesn't really is Bigfoot to a degree, and maybe Native American mythology, but nothing European at least. Like
Hmm.
not the major mythologies people think of. But it just, I mean, at least
Yeah.
unless I'm not thinking of something, but
Well,
that's actually
just so some of the scattered Green Man mythology
yeah. I
could
mean,
be related to Bigfoot. I think David Floyd, who we've had in a number of our documentaries, probably knows more about that than anyone I know personally, and would be the person to talk to because he did come to the Ohio Bigfoot Conference one year, and he did a slide presentation on Green Man representations in Great Britain, and it was fascinating. I mean, people were astonished at what he was able to show them. But yeah, by and large, the mythology does inform the type of things that people are still seeing, and that's one of the things that Heather's able to really bring to light for STM for sure.
yeah. I mean, if there wasn't already so many good ones out there, I would have tried to get a mythology podcast going too. But
Hmm.
I don't think I can handle a six podcast at this point.
Yeah,
But maybe
yeah, that's
someday.
probably that's probably a lie.
Oh,
I
it's
understand completely.
oh I haven't had a day off from podcasting since June 30th.
Wow,
It's never
man.
ending,
Yeah,
but I love doing it, so I can't complain. I mean,
yeah, that's
it's the
awesome.
it's the behind the scenes stuff that drives you crazy, the editing and all that. As I'm
Hmm.
sure you know.
Yep.
But
Yeah, absolutely. You have to love doing it, or it would be just busy work. You know.
yes, which so this is a question I've been dying to ask you since you are a reverend, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
that is correct.
As I've heard on Monsteropolis, you announced that way many times.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
so, as a reverend, how does that affect you in the paranormal world? Like, I mean, I've heard you talk about this a little, but
Hmm.
I never really got like a straight answer on any show I heard you talk about it. Like, do beliefs cross over in a way, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that I've talked about, I feel like, at length. And I try not to bore people with it, but for me, I come from a background that believes that the Bible is telling the truth about everything that it reports. And if you take it at face value, what it's reporting is a world that's far stranger than most people care to admit. It talks about angels, demons, giants in the earth in the olden days. And I believe that those are, the genre in which those reports come down to us are not meant to be taken as myth or legend, but it's reporting actual facts. And it makes sort of scientific materialist people very uncomfortable because it's talking about there was a time where giants really did walk the earth. And it's talking about angelic beings that can intersect with our lives on occasion. And when they do, it'll scare you out of your wits. So for me, to harmonize belief in a biblical worldview with the paranormal or the supernatural, there's not much of a contradiction. In fact, if you take the Bible seriously as a document, it's saying that there is such a thing as a supernatural realm, which I find fascinating, to note that a lot of the times I think people expect a pastor to say, oh, there's no such thing as ghosts, or, oh, there couldn't be a Bigfoot. But there's nothing in scripture that says there couldn't be. And more to the point, it says that in our world history, there were large people, larger than average.
Yeah.
And so to harmonize those two things isn't difficult. And I think that's the surprise for people, is that now I understand, how things got to that point. I mean, it's a whole historical progression, and I won't bore you with it, but there were schools of thought coming out of the Enlightenment period, going into the 18th and 19th centuries, where biblical scholars were starting to say there cannot be supernatural intervention in the real world, which led to a whole couple of generations of pastors going out into congregations saying things like, there's no such thing as ghosts, or there can't, what we have in the Bible are good teachings for people to live by, but you don't have to believe any of the miraculous stuff. And that's kind of a departure from historic Christianity. In fact, it's a huge departure. But
Yeah.
that's what we got in Western civilization, especially in the late 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. And so I can understand why people say, wow, you're a pastor, but you say you hold the door open for the paranormal and weird things happening. And it's because my particular brand of Christianity never let go of the historic elements that have said, look, there is mystery in the world. And if you take the Bible at face value, it simply says straight up, there are things about God and the world and a realm that you can't normally see that are simply real. And once in a while, it may break through to you, and not to be totally surprised when it does, because it's there. It's there all the time. So that's sort of a longer answer maybe than I sometimes give, but what I have found as a pastor serving in actual congregations is that when people, it's not something I hide, it's not something I advertise either, but it's just a part of who I am. And when people find out about that, probably 95% of the time, they're put at ease, and it enables them to talk about things that have happened to them that have always bothered them, but they've never felt like they can talk about. that's happened every church that I've served at, where once they find out that I'm okay talking about Bigfoot, talking about hauntings and things of that nature, they start to unburden themselves because they've been given the impression that that's not something you can talk about in church. And I'm just there to say that's absolutely something you can talk about in church. That's something you can talk about, at least to this pastor, and I'm not going to laugh at you. I'm going to take you seriously. So that's sort of my story on that.
Which, that answer is amazing. I love that answer. Because, I mean, as an agnostic person myself, I never wanted to claim myself as atheist, well, except in my rebellious teenage years. But since then, I've always classified myself as agnostic because you don't know. I never wanted to say I don't know either way. Like, I wanted to have room to learn. And
sure,
by doing this podcast, the things I've heard that make sense, and I've had some weird stuff happen doing this podcast as well. I had a medium last week literally tell me there's a spirit behind you right now, and she thought it was one of my grandfathers.
Oh, wow.
Which, as someone who's never seen a spirit or a ghost in his life, but has gotten, I mean, my house has spirits, but I've never seen one of them full on. My wife and some of her family have, because they're more sensitive to that type of material, but I haven't seen anything. So, I mean, you know, the old saying, those who want to see don't see, but
right. Yeah.
Which, I mean, I actually have considered myself opening myself up a little bit more to like mediums and like stuff, trying to open my mind in a way, which I don't know. That's an interesting journey I might be going on soon. But
yeah, for sure.
I mean, I grew up Christian. I grew up in a Christian church, and I loved it until, you know, every kid stops loving it when they're in high school and they want to be rebellious. But
yeah,
and because you don't want to believe what mommy and daddy believe, but
right.
But I mean, and I had a cool pastor for most of my life. I mean, I never really talked to him about paranormal stuff, but he was a cool pastor regardless. And maybe he would be down with paranormal stuff. I don't know. I can 100% believe he would be, but
sure.
But yeah, I mean, I listened to a podcast for a while once called Dragons in Genesis, and the whole theory behind it is because there's 8 mentions of dragons in Genesis, which I found that interesting, but the host of it was very monotone. I couldn't keep listening.
Yeah,
but,
I know.
I mean, I love the idea behind it, because the Bible does have fantastical beasts in it that supposedly existed at one point. But and what makes that different from any mythology that there is out there? Which I mean, you said there's giants in the Bible. There's giants in every mythology ever known to man. I mean, Native American, Greeks, Norse. I mean, there's giants in everything. It's just,
it is what it is, right? I mean, they have to be there for a reason. They just have to. Beyond just a dream that we've all dreamed, it seems like something would have caused those stories.
And there's so many versions of giants in different tales and legends, and it's just, it has to exist to some degree. I mean, and plus, as Heather said on your show, they have found bones in the past. I mean, the government usually makes them disappear as fast as they find them, but they find them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're probably all sitting in the Smithsonian basement or something, but
seems like it. Yeah, right.
But I mean, it's just, and it even goes back to Bigfoot with that, because gigantic, or I can never say it right, but you know what I mean.
It's a mouthful. Yeah, I do.
I mean, because that was the original theory I always heard for Bigfoot, was that it was it was around the same time as Homo sapiens, but they thought Homo sapiens killed it out. But what if it got good at hiding, like everything else that humans try to kill? What if it got good at hiding?
Yeah.
But I don't know. With Bigfoot, there's so many theories. I can't stick to one, but
I know. Yeah, me either.
All right. Well, I think it's time we jump over to creature feature, because I've been looking at my list out of the corner of my eye for the last few minutes, and I've got some ideas for you.
Okay.
And we kind of touched on this first one, but I'm just gonna say it because I'm hoping it's something that Small Town Monsters gets to go international for someday.
Oh boy, yes.
And that's Mokele-Mbembe. And I mean, yes, you guys kind of touched on living dinosaurs with your Thunderbird movie a little bit, but I mean, there's Mokele-Mbembe down in the Congo. There's the tribe in South America that worships raptors that live in the forest. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what's your thoughts on living dinosaurs, and could they exist?
Well, I am completely open to the possibility that there could be some relic dinosaurs, especially in the places where they're reported. And the work of, I think it's Roy Mackal in particular, in looking into the Mokele-Mbembe. It just seems like these are such remote places, and places separated off from reality. The so-called civilized world, that there's no reason why not there couldn't be some leftover. They'd have to by nature be pretty small populations at this point, but um, I just think, really, they're on the likelihood spectrum, they fall on the strong end to me. That it just seems quite plausible. And you mentioned before, like the mastodons in the out in the tundra. Uh, who's to say that they're not there? The thing that potentially could change all that, of course, is the climate. Could have certainly a huge impact on some of those relic dinosaurs, where they're at, and could spell the end of them. But yeah, I'm very open to that. I think they have all of the resources that they would need in order to live their lives largely unbothered by humanity, and that's probably the one thing above all that they would need to survive, is just to be left
Yeah,
alone.
I mean, we've all seen what happens in Land of the Lost and Jurassic Park and all the other movies
Yeah,
where
yeah,
dinosaurs are discovered to be alive. I mean,
right,
but
right,
I mean, and Mokele-Mbembe especially because he's supposedly a plant eater, so he's not going to
right,
be going to African villages and kidnapping kids and eating them. I mean,
right. No.
he wants to sit in his river or his pond, stream, whatever it is, and
Hmm.
eat. I mean, yeah, apparently he likes to kill a hippo if it gets in his way every once in a while, but that's just territorial, I think. I don't think
Hmm.
that's for food,
Yeah.
and but that also brings precedent to the whole hollow Earth theory because what if that's how they exist still? What if that's where
Mm.
the pteranodons and pterodactyls that we think are as thunderbirds are just hanging out when they're not flying around kidnapping
Yeah.
kids off the front yards, like in a
Right.
famous Mysteries and Monsters and Mysteries in America segment. But
Hmm. Yeah.
which that's
Yeah.
based on true story, and I've talked about it on this show before. Like it's interesting, and we
Oh,
also
yeah.
just covered this in my other paranormal podcast, Global Strangeness, the other week. We're kind of like Monsteropolis on that show. We pick a topic each week, or we let the audience pick
Hmm.
a topic, and we do that one the next week. But anyway, that kind of satisfies that one.
Okay.
So, you think you guys are going to South America to look for raptors anytime soon?
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, I don't blame you. You're not going to be sitting there like, whoa, blue, back up. Like
Yeah,
it's not going
no.
to work in real life. I don't think.
Right.
But
That's the wrong group to put in front of a raptor for sure.
yeah. So what do you? I mean, you guys covered this somewhat, but what are your thoughts on the origin of skinwalkers?
Well, yeah, we really got into that topic, and I think that the origin of them is pretty clearly in the sort of the black magic realm of indigenous people and Native Americans. Um, it seems to be when they have been willing to talk about it with European people,
Yeah,
it sounds as though that really is getting into some, what would you say, some evil areas as far as what is necessitated to become a skinwalker. You're targeting somebody and terminating them
yeah,
essentially in order to enter into that form. So I think that that's to specifically talking about like the Navajo origins of the skinwalker is ritualistic. It's you know, to use the term loosely, it's a deal with the devil to get
basically
revenge. Yeah. So, and unfortunately, I think unfortunately that term now sort of means a catch-all term for a whole bunch of weirdness because of its attachment to the Skinwalker Ranch. And
Yeah.
you know, it's become so sort of loosely applied to everything that the specific nature of the real Skinwalker lore has been lost, and I think that's a shame. It sort of does a disservice to what that started out as. So that's sort of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. As much as I love The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, I do love that. It's a good
Yeah.
show. But
Yeah.
and I've been trying to get Brandon Fugel on here, but he hasn't
Oh, okay.
he hasn't responded to the tweets like you were nice enough to do. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but hopefully someday. I mean, I'd love to actually talk to him
Yeah,
about like what they
absolutely.
discovered on that ranch. But
Yeah.
because that ranch itself is just has a fascinating history throughout to the mid 1800s when it was first
It does. Yeah.
built. Like, really does.
Yeah. And my first exposure to that whole story was Kelleher and Knapp's book, you know, Hunt for the Skinwalker, which
Yes.
put that place on the map originally. And that book, I will say, does a good job of talking about the Skinwalker origins that we were speaking of, and saying that you know that it's the Uinta Basin and the Utes as a tribe, and their uneasy interaction with the Navajo that led to, you know, a lot of bloodshed and unfortunate things happening in that region of the country.
Yeah, I mean, human history is filled with that in every area of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. Which, actually, funny enough, just to jump back to dinosaurs for a second, because one of the first people I interviewed on the show is an author named Brandy Alexander, and she's a Christian author. But she wrote she wrote a paranormal book, the first one in a series she's writing. It's called Genesis: A Paranormal Alliance Destined to Fight the Forces of Darkness. And basically, in synopsis, it's a book about demons trying to uprise on Earth and take over people that are certain people, and it's a basic demon uprising tale, but it's a boy who can talk to spirits that can help. Is trying to stop it.
Yeah.
But the reason I wanted to bring it up to you is the interesting part is she actually puts that they say the last time the demons broke out of their lock in hell was when the dinosaurs all perished. And that's what I found interesting in it is that she actually, I said it on my show, like you actually gave a biblical explanation for dinosaurs disappearing, which in the Bible, I mean, I read the Bible when I was a kid. It's been 25 years, but there is no actual like explanation for dinosaurs in the Bible, right? Like as far as we know.
Yeah, there's a few passing references to very large creatures in some of the wisdom literature. In the behemoth is one that's referenced, but yeah, it doesn't really. It's sort of a tangent rather than painting a real detailed picture.
Yeah, which I mean, it's interesting because I mean that's when I was younger. That's one of the reasons I immediately like. That was always one of my excuses when my grandfather would question me about why I'm not religious anymore. I'd be like, explain dinosaurs. But I mean, he never could, obviously. But or I mean, I think one thing he always said was, "Oh, that was before the Bible time." We don't know what happened because that was before the Bible time.
Yeah.
But then again, in Sunday school, I used to see paintings of the Garden of Eden with dinosaurs in it. So I don't know.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like everybody's got their own views they put in their art, but
yeah, absolutely. Right. That's right.
So, what do you think about goat men or like the Pope-like monster? I mean, in a world where there's Bigfoots and sheep squatches, do you think that goat men could exist?
I mean, it seems, on one hand, I mean, it seems unlikely. On the other hand, I think it's quite possible, and I guess it depends on how long people had their sighting. If they saw a glimpse of something running through the woods, it's quite possible to misidentify things. Your mind fills in the blanks and
Yeah.
you don't know what you saw. But if somebody saw this in broad daylight for 5 minutes, I
Well,
don't
I
know
mean,
what to say at that point, except they are convinced they saw that thing. Now, what is it is, of course, the $1,000,000 question. But I've had that experience, not specifically Goatman related, but sitting down and talking with people that seem absolutely reliable, that I would trust in almost every situation, and they're telling me they saw something that just doesn't make sense. So you have choices at that point. Do you
yeah,
disbelieve them, or do you believe that they think they saw what they saw, or did they really see that? And that's
yeah.
kind of what you're left with. So I don't know. I mean, a goat man seems to be like what we were talking about earlier, something that stepped right out of mythology. The pages
Satyrs,
of,
yeah.
yeah, into our world. So I guess for a John Keel, that'd be a slam dunk, right? He'd just say, "Well, that was clearly an ultra-terrestrial, and he came through the portal for a while and went back through." But
But yet you got
I-
the Pope-like monster chasing cars with axes, with like holding an axe.
yeah,
Which
right.
the Pope-like monsters, people say it's like a accident gone wrong, like a scientific
Oh
like
yeah.
accident. Like they say it was maybe escaped from a lab or something.
Hmm.
But I mean, out of all the Goatman stories I've heard, the Pope-like monster is one that just like resonates in my head because there's so many sightings of it, and a lot of people do pass at the Pope-like trestle. But is that because of a train, or is that because of a Goatman, or is that
Yeah.
suicidal relating? I mean, who
Right.
knows?
Hmm.
But it's just I don't know. I mean, I believe in Goatman more than I believe in Sheep Squatch. That's all I can say.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it makes
Yeah.
more
That's
sense,
fair. That's fair to say. Sure.
especially because I've seen pictures of Sheep Squatch wearing overalls, which I'm like, come on now.
Yeah.
That makes it less believable.
Right.
Like you don't see
Where does he?
pictures of you don't see
Where does?
Sasquatch wearing overalls in the woods.
No. Yeah. Where does he shop? Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you, but eh, this one actually, yeah, okay, because this also ties into you being a reverend as well, because this has a
Hmm.
religious background.
Hmm.
Do you think there actually could be a chance that vampires exist or ever did exist?
Hmm. Well, I think, I mean, the answer is yes. I think there are, at the very least, the facts are there are people who are convinced today. I mean, there's people in the modern era who are convinced that they are vampires and that they need to drink the blood of other people, even if it's not like drink it till you die and all of
Yeah,
their life force goes into you. They want to taste your blood and they think that it's doing something for them. Now, I think a lot of those stories do come out of a time in history where, death and famine and disease was rampant. And so the idea of becoming a sort of the living dead was constantly almost on people's minds. When the plague was ripping
yeah,
through Europe, for example, that was just the world in which people lived, is that their loved ones were perishing and that they were often just disposed of in rather unfortunate ways, which is an element of the vampire legend. So I think a lot of the vampire history and story grows out of our fear of and our fascination with death, and that maybe if I can make a deal with death, then it won't consume me. Or if I die physically, there's a way that I can keep on existing. The will to live is so powerful that we invent stories like that. So In the Count Dracula sense, I'm not sure. I have my doubts, but certainly it must be said that there are people who, in almost sort of a romantic sense, wish
Yeah.
they were vampires and kind of act like it.
Well, I mean, vampires have been romanticized so much over the last 30, 40 years that it's, I mean, they're always the hunky guys or
Yeah,
the
yeah,
beautiful women in skin tight clothing. Like it's just the way it is.
absolutely.
But the one case that always sticks in my head for vampires, and this is why it's on my list actually, is the Highgate vampire in London,
Mm-hmm.
which has had sightings to this day in the Highgate Cemetery, and I mean, it's been seen for hundreds of years, so I
Yes.
don't know. I don't know what to make of that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
is it possibly just a spirit that's stuck in the cemetery, and people have been adding stories to it to make it more
Yeah,
interesting? But
yeah. That seems plausible to me. I mean, that's once the story gets told, you're always going to have people who add
it's
to
like
it, right?
it's like a game of telephone. Every person adds
Mm-hmm.
on a little detail at the end of
Yeah.
it just to make it a little more interesting. But
Right. Yeah.
so I mean, I don't know. But in a world where there are dogmen who are what people called werewolves for thousands of years, if werewolves exist, which I hate that word, but if werewolves
Yeah.
exist, why wouldn't the other one exist? That because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the legends had to come from somewhere, and I've heard stories out of Romania and that area too, where it all began. That they still believe in this, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a count that lives in a big castle and
Right.
is like has everybody scared to death of it, but I think it's just I don't know. Maybe they do
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah.
I mean, my favorite Stephen King book right there, Salem's Lot.
Right.
When I forget his name always, but the main vampire says to the priest, I was around when your people were still smearing fish on their chests and hiding in caves." Like
Yeah.
I love that line. Like it just
Yeah.
mm, makes you want to believe,
Mm-hmm.
but it's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
All right, I think I'll do one more and then I'll free you from creature feature
Okay.
and we'll wrap up. But
All right.
mm, let's go with mer people because that is honestly something I don't recall being talked about Monsteropolis in detail. At least, I mean, it may have been talked about in passing in one episode,
Yeah.
but because I mean, mer people. Once again, legends have been around since mythology times of mer people and Atlantis and all that. So, what do you think is the possibility of actual mer people?
Well, I don't. I don't know. It's one thing if we did talk about it on Monsteropolis is probably in relation to Atlantis, because there was some Atlantis talk at some point.
Yeah,
Um, I've something that sticks in my mind, and this is probably in one of those books that you and I have both read, like the Reader's Digest compendium of unexplained topics
yeah,
or whatever those were, would put forth the explanation that like a manatee is what sailors were seeing. And that always made me laugh because,
yeah.
you'd have to be pretty, you'd have to have been at sea for a long time to look down and see a manatee and think, ooh, there's a woman for me there. That doesn't square. Um, I do those really exist? I just that's one that I have my doubts about simply because I don't know how that would work biologically. Is that a case where that'd be like a seal? That'd be like a mammal that would, or would there be some way in which they develop gills and be able to breathe in the water? How would they survive? Sort of those basic questions
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
kind of keep me from really saying that it's a definite possibility. I just
but
don't
yet,
know enough about how that would
yeah, I mean,
actually work.
but yet in South America, like they tell stories all the time to this day of that, like,
Oh
oh
yeah,
my uncle, my grandfather saw a mermaid on his fishing when he was on his fishing boat once, like,
sure.
and I don't know. I mean, I would think if they did exist, they'd have to exist since the beginning of time. They were just a creature that evolved in the water and eventually, or I mean, it also lends credence to what if things like selkies are real, like creatures that can transform to human
Yeah.
that live in the water, because then
Hmm.
that's what people are seeing. Then is they're seeing the human transform, but then they see it go in the ocean and disappear, and they
Right.
just
Yeah.
gave it a name. But
Hmm.
I mean, and
Well,
then
and
what?
right, and Japanese legend, you have the kappas, which is
Yeah,
kind of the same thing in a way. I mean that it's a humanoid, but not human,
yeah.
and definitely at home in the water. And yeah, and some of those South American stories, the Amazon and so forth, it's really interesting because so many of those are tied into um, they're tied into stories about faithfulness and family and like being led astray and like like a man sees this beautiful woman by the river and he's lured into into her charms, but it turns out she's actually some type of fish or a woman in disguise, like you were saying. So I always look at sort of what the story is saying too, and I think there's something about water, certainly in our deep memory as human beings, that has to be at work when we tell these stories and when people have sightings of whatever. Is that we're drawn to water. We don't do that well in it ourselves, but we sense that there's something about that we want to experience.
I mean, yeah. Since the beginning of time, mankind lived near water sources. They never,
Hmm.
because they need water. So I mean, we've been living near water since we first crawled out of a cave or crawled out of the ocean, whatever you want to
Yeah.
believe. But
Hmm.
and but it does tie back to Atlantis in a way, because I mean, what if the people of Atlantis were scientifically advanced,
Yeah.
I believe Plato said they were, if I'm thinking of the right philosopher. But and I mean, supposedly he went to Atlantis, and Atlantis fought Greece at one point, according to
Hmm.
his writings. But so maybe they made themselves evolve and get larger, and eventually get more equipped to live in the water. And
Yeah.
when their city did get destroyed, that's how
Yeah.
they survived, and they just spread out through the world and reproduced eventually. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I like that almost better than
I
anything
mean,
else as an explanation.
I've been going by that theory for a long time since I read it in
Hmm.
some book when I was a kid. But
Hmm.
I do have to say, Futurama did that perfectly. But
Right. Yeah.
the city of Atlanta. But
Yeah.
all right, I lied, because this is a there's one more. I don't even want. It's not even a cryptid. It's just a paranormal topic. But
Okay.
and it was first brought to my attention, and I think a lot of people's attentions, by Monsters Among Us podcast, because he started getting calls in about these things, and he gave them a name, which. And I don't recall Monsteropolis ever bringing these up, but I could be wrong. I mean, that's 100 something episodes to have to remember.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but mirrored men.
Hmm.
Have you heard of that phenomenon?
I can't say I have. That's not ringing a bell.
Well, they're usually sighted in rural or in places where civilization is very spread out. And they are three men, all dressed similar in suits, usually, or something like that, but they have been seen with different attire, depending where they're seen. And they walk in synchronization. Every move one makes, the other one makes, and they
Hmm.
walk in a row. And a lot of stories people call in about these types of encounters, they're staring out a window or something at their house. Like, a lot of them were kids when it happened, and they'll be staring out the window. It'll be 10 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, whatever. And all of a sudden, when they finally just turn around and look at the clock again after seeing these creatures, it's 4 or 5 in the morning. Like, a lot of time loss. Which, yes, I know lends credence to aliens as well. But I mean, I Mirrored Men is just one of those new topics that, like, since he started doing those calls in his show, I've been hearing about them more and more everywhere else as well. Some other podcasts have covered it as well. I'm pretty sure Blurry Photos covered it, and then a couple other ones I've heard talk about it. But it's just interesting because could it be aliens or could it be Men in Black or I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so this is one I actually stumped someone from Small Town Monsters. I am proud
Yeah.
of
Oh,
myself.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
am proud of myself.
No, that's good. I mean, it's yeah, I haven't heard about that precise phenomenon. I mean, what it makes me think of is some of the stuff like with Joseph Smith and Mormon background, having people in suits sort of approaching you. Back in the time when Joseph Smith, as the leader of the Mormons, was just getting started, having sort of these random encounters with people, just showing up on your doorstep or in largely rural settings. That's the only sort of correlation that I drew when you were describing that. So that's
It's
pretty wild.
That's interesting because I never even heard that about Joseph Smith, and I mean,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
I've heard a lot about the man because I mean he was an interesting man for sure, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's
because
a lot of confirming things that would happen, like with here where I'm in Ohio. I'm close to Kirtland, which was sort of a development point for Smith after he left New York, and there were people who told stories about having dreams about people showing up, and then the next day being visited by 2 or 3 strangers who told them that they had that dream, and that being part of the Mormon sort of origin story in Northeast Ohio. So that's what I'm referencing there. There's a lot
okay,
more there.
that does sound a little familiar, but I
Yeah.
don't remember. I don't remember that ever being tied to Mormons. I heard about that happening to other
Yeah.
people, but in
Yeah.
like past, but yeah, I mean it's a interesting phenomenon because I mean there's also been stories I've heard where people have seen them hiking in the woods, and
Oh, wow.
it'll be the middle of the day and they're hiking, and these 3 men will walk. These 3 humanoid male figures will walk by, and all of a sudden they come to, and it's dark out. It's nighttime,
Mm-hmm.
and they're in the middle of the woods, and they're like, "What?" like,
yeah.
and I mean, if it was a one-off story I heard about this, I never would believe it was true. But
Mm-hmm.
I've probably heard. I mean, on Monsters Among Us alone, I've heard 15 to 20 different experiences with these creatures.
Wow. Yeah.
So, hey, I might just give you guys an idea for Monsteropolis episode.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. We're always looking for something new to talk about. That's definitely it.
Yeah, Mirrored Men, and then the not the I want to say Plaid Shirt Man, but I know I'm wrong. It's like a shadow person type entity. Yeah, the Plaid Man. Yeah, it's a man. It's a man or spirit that appears wearing like a plaid shirt always, and he's been. A lot of people have like woke up in the middle of the night and he'll be standing in the doorway. That's another one that Monsters Among Us like brought to me, but
Okay.
yeah, and there's another one too, but I can't think of it. I don't know. It's a. I'm trying to get Derek. I should be having Derek Hayes on here in August too because it's a
nice.
dream. Like they actually gave me a shout out in the Monsters Among Us group today for like the
cool.
Because every Wednesday they shout out somebody who does like something in the paranormal world.
Yeah.
And amazingly this week it was me, and I was like, oh my god, sweet.
That's great.
But it's just wow. I mean, it's amazing. But
That's really awesome. Yeah.
I can't think what the other one is. Well, anyway, it would take me a long time to sit here and think of it because I haven't heard a story about it in a while. But I thank you so much, Mark, for coming on. It's been an
you're
honor.
welcome.
Honor.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's great talking to you. And thank you for supporting STM the way that you have. I appreciate that very much.
Oh, it's one of the things that got me back into paranormal after a decade of just getting out of it because of life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not having time or thinking about it. I mean, I still would watch the random documentary, but other than that, like podcasting got me back into it, and Small Town Monsters was half of that got me back into it.
Awesome.
So
yeah, very good.
For all the listeners, we've said it multiple times, but you could find Mark on Monsteropolis, on SasWhat, which just started again a couple months ago, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Which I couldn't find that at Spotify though when I looked for it like a month or two ago. But
oh, really?
I'll have to look again. But
okay,
because I mean I was dying to hear it, and then I looked around Spotify for it, and I was like, why can't I find it? But I don't know. But and of course you could find him on most Small Town Monster Productions, I believe. I mean, have you been in every one, or am I mistaken?
I haven't been in every single one, but I've been in almost every On the Trail of.
Okay.
There's an exception in there. I can't remember what it is. But yeah, I've had at least a little bit of a, if nothing else, sort of an advisory role in most of the projects.
Yeah, which I mean, as knowledgeable as you are about a lot of these things, I could believe that. So I mean, I know that for a fact. But and when is Seth coming back to Monsteropolis, if ever?
That is maybe the biggest mystery of all. I don't know. We'll see.
Seems like he's been gone since like Christmas.
Yeah, no, that's about right. That's about right.
I remember him talking about oh my God, how am I forgetting the freaking thing? Krampus. Why do I want to say? I wanted to say Krakoa for some reason. I'm like, I don't know why. But
yeah,
Krampus. Yeah, yeah. That was the last episode I think I heard him on. But but I mean, like I said, the combo of you and Heather together has been like a nice. I mean, it seems like a lot less. It seems like they're still joking around, of course, because that's always going to happen on a good podcast. But it's more focused on like history and everything too, as well, which is great. It's great. Yeah. I mean, I learned so much from Monsteropolis every freaking time an episode comes out. So
that's awesome. Thank you.
Including if you go to Alaska, plan to be sick for a day.
That seems right. Kind of the rule of thumb.
But thank you. Any other place that you want, or any other thing you guys do that you want to shout out? Socials?
No,
anything?
I mean that pretty much does it. I mean we're everywhere. Small Town Monsters, STMBN is the broadcast network. We just launched the Small Town Monsters publishing imprint that has its own account out there. So just look for those things, and SmallTownMonsters.com is sort of the hub for all of it.
Yes, which I've been on that website many times back in the day when I had to try to find the earliest podcast episodes. But
yeah.
Well, once again, Mark. Thank you for coming on. It's been an honor. And to all my listeners, you can find me on the Paranormal the New Normal Facebook group. Everything I do is on there. So, and I usually get previews of who's going to be on the show coming up and when I'll be doing live. So look on there and join us next time for another live show with whoever my guest is next time, which off the top of my head, I don't remember. So I got a lot of interviews coming up, but thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time, which should be Sunday, maybe. I'm not sure, but just keep an eye on the group. You'll see it.